What's up, everybody? Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Simon and Akdi Movie Reviews. This is episode 89. My name is Simon Hill, Black American from Louisiana, and I'm here with my beautiful wife. Say hi to the people.
Hi everyone, I'm Akdi and I'm from Turkey, and today we are reviewing a movie called Timbuktu.
Now, before we begin, I just want to say, Akdi, I love you.
I love you too.
And part of the reason I love you is that you always bring me back to my core. I wanted to do these movie reviews originally just doing like black movies, African movies, movies related to, my end of the struggle. You know what I mean? And you picked this movie, and I can say I really enjoyed it, and I'm glad that you picked this. So thank you, thank you.
Aw, I'm glad you liked it. I like this movie too.
And for people that haven't heard of this movie, this is a French Mauritian film, and it takes place, I believe, in Mali or not Mauritius, sorry, Mauritania. I always confuse those two countries. Anyway, Mauritania is a very large country in Western Africa, also part of the Sahel region, and it's a mostly Muslim country as well. And they've had issues with Islamic extremism, especially in the north, like in a lot of these Sahelian nations with a large Muslim population. And this talks about, or it shows the experience of people living under the control of Islamic extremist groups. And it's a very interesting film in that it's hyper realistic. It's more of like a slice of life. There are many plot lines that don't get tied up in a bow. There's no hero. There's definitely a villain, but there's no progression of the plot that leads to some sort of resolution like we would see in like a Western film. So it's very different storytelling. But we watched it last night, and I wanted to know, what did you think of it after we watched it?
Yeah, I actually really liked it. It's not like the, most exciting movie ever, maybe, but in my opinion, I really like the fact that, like you said, it's a slice of life, but it's also like a movie that we know where the movie stands politically and ethically, but it's not in your face.
Mm-hmm.
And even like, yes, we had a villain in the movie and there were bad guys in the movie, but there's like a grace shown even to the bad guys.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know like why the director decided to do that. He's an African director, Abderrahmane Sissako. And he is from Mauritania, but he also grew up in Mali as well.
Mm-hmm.
So like, I don't know, I know where the director or, where the politics stands, but at the same time, I like that, not in your face, we hate terrorists thing in this movie. And I'm not trying to like defend them, obviously, but it was just like, this is how it happens when it happens.
Yeah, the thing about this film, to some degree, at the end of the film, ISIS, which I know it's not ISIS, it's actually this group called Ansar Dine, which was a very specific small sect of an extremist Islamic group that operated in Mali, in the Sahel region by and large. But, at the end of the movie, they kind of become the good guys because they're punishing a person, which is an interesting way of, telling this story, right? But I think when I watched this film, and I didn't want to do this review after we watched it because I really wanted to meditate and sit on it. And my takeaway from this film is that it asks a very deep question: can there be justice under an unjust system? And it also made me think about my country a lot because I think this film says a lot about the death penalty. But I wanted to ask you, like, if the film isn't saying, terrorism bad, okay, like, because we all understand that it's bad, what do you think the film is trying to say?
I think, like, from my opinion, it is showing that, how stupid something like this might be, like this type of oppressive, type of living, and what it imposes on regular day people. It shows like the irony in all of this, and it shows, it's sort of saying like, some things in life can be gray. Even though we know like they are bad things, they could still have grayness in them. Yeah, that's what I got from this movie. Because
Yeah.
there's also like a very good use of irony and, you know, humor, even in this like such a sad story, obviously. Like we're watching terrorists take over a village or a city, right? So yeah, even in that, there's humor, shown in the movie, and there's like a great use of irony, which is also like something that I really liked.
Hmm.
And I agree with you. I'm glad that we didn't do the review like the first minute after we finished the movie. Cause the more that I thought about it, like overnight, the more I liked it.
Yeah, yeah. Now, can I tell a story basically touching on that point that you were talking about with humor and irony? Can I say something real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
So a few years ago, if some of you know, I used to live in Tunisia, and I was living in Tunisia during a year that it was Ramadan. Right. Well, Ramadan is every year, of course, but I was living there during a time when there was Ramadan. And one of the traditions in the Arab world during Ramadan is that they have a 30-part series that usually comes on TV that families all sit around the television and watch together. And the year that I was there, one of the popular shows that was on was this show called Black Crows. And Black Crows is this 30-part series about ISIS, right? So each episode is like an hour long, and it's like depicting ISIS doing like horrible things and the hypocrisy of their whole ideology and system of government and things like that. And it's this film reminded me of that TV show that I watched that Ramadan because, like, you know, in the show, they show a lot of the, like I said, irony and hypocrisy of living under ISIS, right? Like behind closed doors, the leaders are all smoking or drinking alcohol, and they're taking people's wives and getting married for one night just to have sex with them and stuff like that. So it was very, how can I say that? It brought back a lot of memories for me watching this film. I don't know if you've ever seen any of those shows or if that tradition exists in Turkey.
No, we don't have a tradition like that. Because we already have like super long, you know, Turkish series. But I like that tradition actually. I wish we did.
Yeah, but just imagine, like, you know, you're having like a great Ramadan dinner and you're watching like people getting beheaded like on TV.
Yeah, it was kind of like not a family watch maybe.
Hmm.
And like most of the time Ramadan is a family time.
Yeah.
But I actually like that tradition, but I've never like watched a documentary. I don't know, maybe I probably watched it, but I don't remember it. Maybe it wasn't as striking, or it's not just in my memory
Right.
watching like anything related to like terrorist
Right, right.
attacks and
Well, Black
things.
Crows isn't a documentary. It's more of a dramatization. So it's like a fictional recreation of like ISIS's story and stuff like that. And
Mm.
ask anybody from the Arab world. I don't think this is only a Tunisian thing. I think they do it in a lot of the Arab countries. The family gathers around and watches a wholesome 30-part series every single night. And, that show, in it made me think about how the Arab world thinks about, Islamic extremism versus how the West thinks about Islamic extremism. Because I've watched other movies, and I believe there was a movie on Netflix a few years ago called Layla, which is about this young girl who's living like in the Netherlands, and she is getting more and more radicalized because she lives like on the margins of society, like all the other Muslims do, or many of the other Muslims do in the Netherlands. And so, yeah, she eventually, I think, becomes like an ISIS bride or something like that. And it's like a very, very serious drama. When you compare that to like how the Arab world thinks about, Islamic extremism, there's a bit of like dramatization, like, oh, how tragic these people are twisting beautiful religion. But there's also a mix of like humor and stuff like that when thinking about it. And that's how I was, watching this film. If this film was made by like an American director or somebody from the West, it would have been hella more dramatic, maybe a tearjerker. But this one is mixed with, some humor and irony because that's just how people deal with those sorts of, radical ideas and crazy people in their society. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense because I think when you watch this movie, you know it's coming from a native eye,
Hmm.
and it's not like, you know, someone out of this region. And also, like, usually when you have these movies, maybe there's like sometimes a riot against the terrorists and the people win and whatnot, or something bad happens to them. Yeah, there are like mini rebellions in this movie. Like the woman, the women were required to wear gloves all the time, and she was selling fish. And so like people come up to him and say like, why aren't you wearing your gloves? And she's like, I'm selling fish. Like, how am I supposed to sell fish, water my fish with gloves?
Mm-hmm.
And then like she rebels against them and she says like, here, cut my hand if you want to.
Mm-hmm.
So there are like those mini rebellions in the movie, but also like the residents of the town, the natives of the town are not like freaking out
Mm-hmm.
and going like against the regime that's like taken over them. They're like sort of trying to survive.
Yeah.
And maybe that says that like something about what you said as well.
Yeah, when I think about how this film is like structured, it's not once again a plot story with a hero versus the villain and either some defeat or triumph in the resolution. It's like and I don't know if I'm just having my brain twisted because of all the homework I'm doing, but this film is like a sociological case study. Right? It's like, okay, what if a society was taken over by Islamic extremists? Not everything would just change overnight and everybody is just brutalized and forced into submission to the new regime. There's like pockets of resistance, parts of syncretization. There's, elements of the old ways still existing. And that's sort of like what we see, in this film. So, yeah. I think there was a article that you wanted us to read and in
Yeah.
regards to talking about this film because it breaks down a lot of the important points and we have a lot to discuss. So I don't know if you want to open it up and introduce it to the people.
Yeah. I have it open here. So it's called Deep Focus Timbuktu, and it's written by Michael Sarago on January 2015. And shall I start?
Go ahead.
Okay. So Abderrahmane Sissako's Timbuktu is bracingly original and unexpected, a welcome shock to the system for American moviegoers who've grown used to seeing prosaic melodrama in topical or torn from the headline movies. This fearless poetic response to the jihadist occupation of the title city and its imposition of Sharia law unfolds in charged tableau and conveys the wreckage of a civilization lyrically and potentially in
Potently.
95 spare suggestive minutes. What?
Potently.
Okay, sorry. What a relief to see a fact-inspired, imaginative work that doesn't start with the words based on a true story. Still, it might help situate viewers to know that the militant Islamist group Ansar Dine dominated Timbuktu and other towns in northern Mali in West Africa for most of 2012 before French and Malian forces drove them out.
Yeah, I think about 1 or 2 years ago, we saw a wave of coups happen in West Africa. And that's because like a lot of the people there are dissatisfied with like French and the neo-colonialism that's happening there. But to some degree, like the French and American forces kind of did a lot to try to like fight the Islamic jihadists that were in those regions, right? It wasn't perfect by any means. And of course, anytime former colonial powers are involved, they're gonna like not care about the civilians. So there's like drone strikes on like, innocent people and stuff like that. But for their own self-interest, like for the protection of Fortress Europe and for global stability, they were also like, killing a lot of the Islamists too. So, it's kind of a tragedy what's happening in West Africa and the Sahel region now because it's like groups like this are starting to come back. Right. I believe there was a terrorist attack in Burkina Faso a few weeks ago where like 100 something people were murdered by, Islamist groups. So this film is talking about something really important that's happening in the world right now, but the eyes of the world are not on it because it's happening in Africa, of course, and there's global racism, and we're also focused on Ukraine and Gaza and other conflicts.
Yeah, and I think also like in the eyes of like most of the world, that comes from like the Western perspective is that like sort of seeing Africa always in conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And now people are sort of like I don't want to say used to it, but like they're desensitized to it, maybe in a way, because like because of the historical things that happened, Africa has been at a disadvantage. And because of that, like there are coups that are happening, like I don't know, like poverty and
Civil wars.
and like all the economic stuff can cause political conflict. And I feel like that's what also is happening.
Yeah, but that's sort of like, uninterest in West Africa and what's happening in Africa is gonna bite the rest of the world in the ass when one of those West African countries like falls down and like the black flag of like ISIS goes up, right? Like it's very
Yeah.
likely we could see like something like Afghanistan in West Africa in our lifetime, which is crazy to think about.
Yeah, yeah. And, I hope that something like that doesn't happen because, oh yeah, extremist in any form is just insane, and they should not exist.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but I'll continue with the article. So Sissako, who was raised in Mauritania and Mali and co-wrote the film with Kessan Tal, sets a unique tone of otherworldly dread in the opening shot of a gazelle racing away from a pickup truck filled with rifle-toting extremists. In Sissako's vision, the jihadists' attempt to lay down the Sharia law is more successful at annihilating everything organic than it is at re-establishing an antique and absolute morality.
Okay, I was thinking about like the symbolism of the antelope at the beginning when it's running, and the guys in the back of the pickup truck are like, don't kill it, just tire it out. Like I was wondering what the point of that was, but that is a good way of thinking about that. Like instead of allowing something organic to grow, all they know is chase and kill and hunt. And I think there's a saying like, the revolutionaries are good at fighting a war, but not at ending war, right? Or governing after war. And that's sort of like what these young men are. What I would have liked though is like to have a bit more background on like how the terrorists came to be. And there's a hint of that in the film, and I'll talk about that later. But yeah, any comments?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is why, these sort of extreme terrorist groups recruit young men, because I feel like young men are just very energetic and they can be very like driven by their like passion and anger a lot, if they are like, brainwashed in a certain way. And I feel like that's kind of what is happening, because they're feeling like, oh, they're like ruling the world. They own the city. They can do everything. They can kill someone for doing something that they don't like. They can take any woman and things like that. And this is like such a toxic power psychology.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Continuing, part of Sissako's strategy is to thrust viewers into a roiling yet slow-moving and mysterious maelstrom. I can't say this word. Okay. In the first few minutes, jihadist bullets tear up tribal masks and West African statues that could be pagan gods or outlawed art. Sissako proves his visual mastery immediately. One sculpture falls back as if executed, while other issues gun smoke from its mouth as if taking a hellish last gasp.
Yeah. So, see, I don't know how to say this, but I'm going to try to articulate it. Like, in extremist Islamic ideology, like there should be no idols built because we should always think about God, right? This is why some people even take it to the extreme and like destroy the graves of like the Sahaba, like the people that knew Muhammad. Like they're literally in Saudi Arabia, like building over the tomb of his mother and his cousins and stuff like that because they don't want anybody worshiping anything but God. And when ISIS came to power in the Middle East, they were like destroying ancient like Sumerian artifacts and like Christian temples that existed for like thousands of years, just like blowing it up. The Taliban in Afghanistan blew up like 1,000-foot statue of Buddha that had existed for 1,000 years. And they were just like, yeah, let's just do it because Allah is one, right? So yeah, when they're destroying this African art, I think about like all that culture that's lost, and also how like Islamic extremism is like an attack on African identity as well. That's what I was thinking when I saw them blow the titties off of those, bronze statues. But
Yeah.
any comments?
Yeah, before like starting the review, I was watching this documentary about like, why is Timbuktu dangerous now? And one guy is talking about how they burnt the library.
Mm-hmm.
And like I think you told me also last night, there was a historical library where they had like very old Qurans and like different artifacts that were like super old, and there were like 4,200 of them or something. So it was very like historically rich. And basically when the Western forces and Malayan forces arrived there to take over the situation, the young terrorists that were left behind set the library on fire. And they asked the Malayan men there, like, why do you think they did that?
Yeah.
Because they're Muslim, right? Why would they hurt thousands of years of like Quran? And he said like they're trying to harm the nation, they're trying to harm our nation, and that's why they did it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I kind of like agree with that, because then why would you do that? It's literally Islamic art.
Well, we have to remember, like, these Islamic extremist groups are fascist at their core. And fascists, anytime they get in power, what they want to do is rewrite history and also literally burn bridges with the past. So that's why, when the Nazis came to power, they had a night where they just burned all the books. In America, we have proto-fascism where they're trying to ban books. And in earlier points in American history, they literally had book burnings and stuff like that. My generation, we had the Christian extremists burning Harry Potter books. Like, this used to be a thing all across my country. Like, these Christian families would get together and buy all the Harry Potter books and then burn them, because buying them, doesn't help and make them want to make more, right? So,
Yeah.
But another thing I was thinking about, and the point I was trying to get at earlier, is like there's an argument to be made that Islam in and of itself is a religion that cannot fit for Black people. I remember listening to this Muslim woman who is an African American woman who was a convert. She was talking about how in Islam there's the commandment for women to cover their hair. But what if a Black woman wants to naturally let her afro grow? So she's going to have like, a hijab over her head and have like a big beehive on top of her shit. You get what I'm saying? Like, it wouldn't make sense. There's like some ways that, Africanness, and if you want to connote Blackness with that, cannot fit with Islam, right? I tend to disagree with that, but that's what that scene made me think of. Like how, Islamic forces, when they're taken to the extreme, can, be antagonistic to just Black identity in and of itself. And I think there is an undercurrent of like the discussion between Blackness and Islam within this film, from my viewing of it. But I don't know if you had any comments on that.
Yeah. I mean, in my opinion, these sorts of like, rules and things that you have to do for any religion, they should be like modernized. I don't understand why, like, people are so insistent about it when they don't really have to do anything with your heart believing in Allah, with your relationship with God or Allah, like yourself. I know it stands for something, but then you also have to remember, like, it's written for a certain time. So like, and it goes the same with like destroying art. Maybe back then art wasn't something that people cared about. They didn't even know it existed, and now we have it, or we have historical artifacts. So yeah, I don't understand why certain rules cannot be adjusted to the times now and then still keep that purity of heart between you and God. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I think, I tend to agree with that. Like, I don't think we should modernize religion, but I think that religion should be understood as something personal to the self. And that we're past the point of theocracies being like a suitable idea for running society.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like, let's say there's an African woman who's growing out her afro and she's uncomfortable wearing the head wheel thing. And, yeah, so like then she's just covering her body and she's been a good, woman, a good person her entire life. So what? She's gonna like go to hell because she didn't cover her hair?
Mm-hmm.
Like that makes no sense.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'll continue.
One more thing, like
Yeah.
being in Africa, we went to Tanzania and Kenya, and there's a lot of Muslims there. One way that Islam can't work with blackness is like there's a lot of niash. You can't cover all that niash with just a burqa.
You're silly.
I know I'm supposed to look away, but it's hard. It's hard not to see it.
Well, it's hard for me as well. And I know, like, lesbian feelings are also a sin, probably.
Yes.
Anyway.
We're both going to Jahannam for that.
Wow. No, I mean, yeah, like, I don't know, like putting sins down for things that you cannot like control. And I'm not talking about like looking at Niash here.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway. Then we see jihadists hand a pale, bespectacled man to another group of armed guards taking care to get his medications just right because one has been refilled with a generic drug. Is the man a hostage or perhaps a rival group's negotiator? We never find out, but the scene is oddly indelible because of its casualness. The guards remove his blindfold, inspect his meds, hand him a drink with a low-key cheers, then restore his blindfold and seat him in another Toyota pickup. It's a gently ominous introduction to this film's vision of jihadist hegemony.
My first thought seeing that white guy being taken in by ISIS, I was like, that's Sidney Schanberg from the Killing Fields. But he he didn't know when to stop. He got a Pulitzer Prize, but he's like, I need another one. I'm going to go to ISIS land.
Wow.
But death couldn't save him, so now he's about to get his ass handed to him. So, yeah, that was my first reaction to that. I got a lot more to say, but, what was your reaction to that scene?
I think I thought the same. I thought they were capturing this guy and possibly like it might be a Westerner, who's like either visiting or like a journalist, like what you said. So yeah, but then I was like, it says in the review, I was confused, like, because they didn't really do anything bad to him. They didn't really treat him bad. They were sort of caring for his medical condition. So it was confusing if they were like friends with this guy or not friends with this guy.
Okay. One thing I gotta say about that scene is like one of the ISIS dudes was hella handsome. That nigga looked like Shamar Moore. That nigga looked like Morris Chestnut. like ISIS Zaddy, please take me.
You're not talking about the head of ISIS, right?
No, like the guy that was meeting with the white guy who was tied up.
Wow.
I was like, nigga, if you don't get out of Mauritania and make it to Hollywood, rip that runway, baby.
Wow.
Anyway.
There were a lot of runway moments in this movie.
Very, very.
Not gonna like Malayan people, in general, they were like good looking people.
Okay, alright, now you gotta chill. Hey, none of that.
Okay.
I'm joking.
Wow.
But, I don't want to think too much about who he was. Maybe he was a pharmacist. Maybe he was a kidnapped person handing over his last drugs to the leader. Who knows? Who cares? Because in this film, there's a lot of characters and plot lines that are introduced and never, fulfilled, like we said at the beginning of this film. My interpretation of that scene is like any movie has to show legitimacy for the authority of the villain. And in this case, it's ISIS running society. And this film doesn't escape white supremacy by showing that we're the ones in charge because we have a kidnapped white man, right? Like this, by showing that we are able to, take this person and have him under our control, the only, really white person we see on screen or a person racialized as white. Like, it's showing that we're in control here. France don't run this. America don't run this. We got this. You get what I'm saying? So by taking what's considered the most powerful thing in our world as we understand, in this case, the white man, like they're able to show like the dominance they have in society. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That makes sense because it could have been, a native Timbuktu.
Right, but it wouldn't make
But it wasn't.
it wouldn't have as much impact if they just captured some random black African guy. You get what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah. No, I get it. And yeah, maybe that was the reason why they showed that, to show, that their power.
Yeah. And it also reminded me of like in my country, like during our invasion of Afghanistan, there were a lot of like Sidney Shandbergs going over to Afghanistan and Iraq trying to like, make their, make sure that they were in contention for that Pulitzer Prize for like Journalist
Mm.
of the Year award. And a lot of those guys got kidnapped by ISIS and Al Qaeda and then like beheaded like on national TV. So
Damn.
it made me think about that. Like that's what I grew up seeing. Like,
Yeah. And
someone,
I think
yeah.
you sort of expect this, but then you get like the other side of it. I thought because they bring in the men with blindfolds, so I thought they were going to execute him or something.
Yeah. I thought they were gonna really fuck him up, but nope.
Yeah.
He's just sort of in and out, and that's it. But anyway, let's continue.
Okay. Rather than tell a story, Sissako maps out an oppressed region with a disturbing emotional topography. The ancient city, with its narrow sand streets and modest sandstone or adobe brick buildings, is a physical and political maze. Jihadists harass anyone outside by day, ordering women to wear socks and gloves and men to roll up their pants, presumably to pay homage to the Prophet Muhammad.
Sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
They forbid citizens to hang out or do just about anything, as one bored town crier puts it. They argue fervidly about their favorite soccer teams while forbidding soccer. In one chilling moment, a soccer ball bumps down a set of stairs, and the young man who follows seconds later is immediately accused of the lash-worthy sin of illegal play. In its own matter-of-fact way, it is as powerful as the murdered girl's bouncing ball in Fritz Lang's M.
I haven't seen that film, but I might want to
Yeah.
check it out. Like when they start showing like parts of life, like ISIS trying to enforce people to like wear gloves, like Akdi said earlier, it sort of shows like the ridiculousness of their idea and how Islamic extremism goes too far. I don't know if, I'm more than certain it's going to show up in this review, but before, they show ISIS taking over the city, ISIS like walks into this mosque where they find, people praying in one of those iconic buildings in Timbuktu, like those mud buildings with the sticks sticking out of them and stuff like that. They find like this old imam there, and he's like telling the people, like, you came to do jihad in the place of God. This is not a place for you. I kindly ask you to leave. And like, that's what sort of like what Timbuktu is like as a whole. Like it was probably a city before these guys showed up that had, some sort of peace and syncretism with their religion rather than having this heavy-handed type of religion they want to bring. So that's what I was thinking about.
Yeah, it doesn't really make us, for me, it doesn't really make sense. Like, why would they go into the mosque to make jihad? Because obviously the mosque has people that already believes in Islam. So it's like, and also, if you think about it, like, why are they doing jihad in this country where most of the people are Muslim already? So it's like, I thought jihad was to like make non-Muslims Muslim and not like Muslims more Muslim. Like it does not make any sense. Why would you like inflict pain on already Muslim people? So in itself, I think you can see like sort of the comedic irony in it and also like sad. And it doesn't really feel anything more than, a power show.
Yeah. And also, like, it shows that power, is a dialectic. Like power is like how much you can inflict on somebody, but almost how much you can resist. And the people of Timbuktu, like, they're not just victims. Like, what I like to see in this film is like, they're not just, passive sheep that are oppressed. There's great acts of resistance. I don't know if this comes up in the review, but they start, the soccer is banned. So what the kids do, they go to the soccer field and they play with an imaginary ball. And that by far is my favorite scene of the film.
Yeah.
They are
That
really out
scene
there
is so
seriously
magical.
playing, like kicking the ball, blocking it, having fouls, everything. It's great.
Yeah. Okay, then let me get to that part because it talks about it in the next two paragraphs, and then we can talk more about it. In brilliant moments of mute protest and irony, an old man strips to his shorts after vainly trying to get his loose flowing pants to stay put, and an old woman gingerly walks barefoot without gloves or veil in an empty street in glorious cerulean finery. In the nighttime, patrols armed with guns and flashlights spy on rooftops and alleyways, tuning their ears to pick up any sound of music. They report by cell phone to the town's jihadist central, tree dour, sleepy-looking men in a Spartan room, armed with weapons and a Quran. When they overhear one household singing songs of praise to the Prophet.
Yeah, so I don't know if this will be in this review later because I'm reacting to this like as she's reading it. But an interesting thing about this film, so ISIS is going through the city announcing through the megaphone, music is banned, women wear gloves, no twerking, okay, like they're saying all this, but they have to switch languages. And throughout this movie, like there's this constant need for translation. And because many of the people there speak Bambara, French, Tamashek, and Arabic, and so like there's this constant sort of like, how do we get this message across? And whenever you have a translation, there are inevitably things that are lost in translation, whether purposefully or unwittingly, right? And I just find that interesting. That's another way of looking at this film, like. Everybody here is Muslim. Before ISIS showed up, they were already Muslim. But the language that the invaders are speaking of Islam is different than the language that the people understood Islam. And so there's this constant, need for translation of this new idea with the old way of doing things or old way of communicating faith. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I don't know if it was in this review because I've read like multiple reviews about this film, but in one of them it did say like it does sort of feel somewhere stuck between time and like ancient things and modernity.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I agree with you in the sense that now we see like multi-language interactions in big cities,
Mm-hmm.
right? And translations and everything. And then we see it in this movie. But like the scenery is very ancient, but then they also have like, cell phones and they are like talking about World Cup, like the soldiers and things like that. So I like that contrast of like ancientness, but also like modernity. And yeah. And once again, like, it was very sort of funny to see like those, jihadists call their, leader because they're puzzled. They're like, oh, there's a song playing, but it's about Prophet.
Mm-hmm.
And it's praising the Prophet. So what do we do? Like, do we arrest them or not arrest them? Like, we don't know what to do. So yeah, it was kind of showing like you can believe and praise the God in different ways, and it should be fine.
Yeah, like there's, that's one of the hilarious moments in this movie. Like those many times when like people are like caught doing something bad, what they think is bad, but it's actually like the right thing or like a normal thing. And it's nothing meant to disrespect religion, right? And that was one of those things I remember vividly. Like we hear them playing music, but they're singing about how much they love God. What should we do? And there's also no resolution to it, really. Right? Like people get punished in this film, but there's so many times when we find people breaking the law and nothing happens. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, and I guess like we will also come to that, but yeah, like some people get punished and some people don't,
Mm-hmm.
which is like, I guess again it shows the hypocrisy of the power of jihadists.
Yeah,
and there isn't like really a law. They're sort of we see they're making up the law as they go along.
Yeah, and let me just talk about that because there's a scene in this film where this young man is trying to film an ISIS video, and he's saying that I used to be a rapper, but I've given my life to Islam, but he can't really commit to this idea. And there are many people throughout this film that are like playing guitars and singing songs and stuff like that. And like how music is so integral to like black life. Like I think we could all agree, like, Africans and black people across the world, like we really love and appreciate music, right? Not because it's something like inherently with us. It's just like a cultural practice that many black African tribes had and stuff like that. You get what I'm saying? So like,
Yeah.
throughout this film, we see this love of music conflict with Islam, which I think goes back to the point I was making earlier about how many parts, there's so much in Islam that sort of conflicts with like natural, black African life. Does that make sense? And in Islam, they explicitly forbid stringed instruments. And some people take it further, saying that music is a distraction. And, when I think about some of my favorite rappers like Freeway or Lupe Fiasco, who are Muslim American rappers, like they've spoken about how, I feel conflicted. I'm making music, but I feel like it's against my religion. And that's one of the more unique things about Islam. I don't think any other religion has like this, strict stance on Islam that some Muslims have, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It feels like, for example, Christianity is very in tune with music because they have like the choirs and everything. But I don't know if there's like actually an originally law that forbids music. But yeah, I really understand that because when I was in middle school, I went to like a somewhat like an extremist Islamist school. Not an extremist, but like, I went to one of Gulen's schools, basically.
Rest in peace.
And no, don't rest in peace. Anyway, yeah. And they were trying to like somewhat teach us a lot about Islam. Like it was an integral part, but they were not forcing us to believe in anything. They just assumed all of us were already Muslims, right? And they would literally, our music teacher would used to do like music competitions, song competitions where, students would go up there and perform. And then at the same time, our Islam teacher would say it's a sin to sing to the boys. Like, if you sing in front of the boys, it is a sin.
Right.
So like, even in our own school, it was so ironic and I was so conflicted because at the time I was trying to be a Muslim. But I think like those years were the years that sort of told me, okay, I don't think I'm going to be a Muslim because this shit don't make no sense.
Yeah, that's because, and I'm going to butcher this word, but some Muslims believe a woman's voice is her aura, and aura is like your private parts. So,
Yeah.
Your private parts need to be protected. So singing in front of boys is considered not a good thing.
Yeah, but it didn't make sense because I had two authorities, like both teachers, telling me totally different things.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But yeah. Okay, so I'll continue. Anything else?
No, I just really wanted to know what you thought about the switching of languages throughout this film, because I think, that's a big part. Like, and there's not many other films that do that, which I think brings some uniqueness to this film, like the constant translations that have to happen for information to flow.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like I said, I think it gave a little bit of like that international feeling. And also at the same time, I agree with you. Like there were some things that got lost in the translation.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, I think it very emphasized that this jihadist group was strangers.
Mm-hmm.
They were not from there. They didn't even speak the language, and they needed translation to talk to the people, even to enforce their ideas and laws. Right? So it's like further emphasizes that they don't really have the best interests of the region because they're not from there.
Mm.
And also like I was, the young guy who was like a secretary to the head of the jihadist, right?
Mm.
Abdul Karim.
Mm-hmm.
And then his like driver, his secretary, I don't know his name, but that guy like knew like 4 languages or something,
Yeah.
And, yeah, like he was, I don't know if he was from Timbuktu, and he changed sides. But like I thought he was very interesting character.
Yeah, I think for us, because we didn't grow up in multilingual communities, right? Like, the way they're living there might seem more international, but I think, maybe in parts of Turkey, you have people that switch all the time between Kurdish and Turkish and then Arabic, right? In parts of America, you have people that switch all the time between Spanish and English. And in Africa, because there's so many different languages and cultures and stuff like that, people are switching all the time between languages too. And I just thought, in this film, it really made it feel indigenous, because that's probably a very real reality in so many African communities, like switching languages, needing translators, needing these intermediaries to communicate ideas, but also people being foreigners into a land, imposing a new language and an idea.
Yeah, like they literally need translators within their group in order to enforce their laws. Because language is something that's very powerful.
Yeah.
If they don't, like, if they can't tell people, oh, you have to wear gloves, you have to, like, roll up your sleeves and all of these things, they cannot really, like, punish people because they wouldn't be able to justify it.
Yeah.
So I wish they didn't have any translators.
Yeah. All right,
Anyway.
let's go ahead.
Yeah. What keeps the movie from becoming static is Sissako's modulation of the atmosphere, from volatile and anarchic to monolithically intense and bleak. Early on, a brave female fishmonger who says she can't wear gloves and sell fish dares the morality cops to cut off her hands. They back away. The city's resident loon imperiously parades around with her berry-boned hair exposed, wearing a multicolored gown complete with a crazy long flowing train. She casually calls jihadists assholes and stops one of their transports simply by holding her arms aloft. Later, a gorgeous young woman croons a pulsating song, supported by a room full of friends and musicians. She, though, doesn't escape punishment. In one of the movie's many exalting leaps into transcendent feeling, she suddenly elevates her cries of agony under the lash into a lacerating aria. She sings to bear the pain and to prove she's still alive.
Yo, I'm glad the writer said gorgeous young woman, because I was like, I can't be the only one that think that's a bad bit.
No, that's why I said, like, the people in this movie are very pretty, like beautiful faces. I'm not like trying to sexualize them, literally beautiful faces.
Hola, Molly, mommy. Okay, all right.
Wow. Okay, you're married, Simon, so you can chill.
Hey, 2 wives. I got 2 wives. I'm joking.
Stop. But no, like, she definitely had, like, that beautiful aura about her. And also, like, the song was really beautiful.
Yeah.
And so it has that sort of effect in you that, when I saw that scene, it was also one of my favorite scenes, because you can see the happiness in desperate moments and how people stick together and how music is part of that.
Yeah, my thing was, like, those lashes didn't look that bad. Like, I got worse whoopings from, like, my grandma. Like, like my 70-year-old grandma could whip that belt better than that, like, calorie deficient ISIS soldier. Like, but
wow, well, she's getting like 80 of those lashes.
40, but like those 40 were like hella light. Like, Kunta Kinte went through worse. You know what I'm saying?
No, they said she's getting 40 for singing and then 40 for meeting without her parents.
Okay, I got you. Well, it was still bad. But I'm just saying, like, an ISIS soldier living off like 900 calories a day and like 4 hours of sleep probably is not going to give like the worst whooping you've ever had, right? Like, this 16-year-old boy don't know how to whip that belt like how my mama used to do, how granny used to do, especially how daddy used to do. You know what I'm saying? So
you're crazy.
I was like, when I saw that whooping, man, I was like, oh, okay, I could live under ISIS. I'll be singing all the time.
I know you would be getting a whipping every day because you cannot live without your music.
I know, right? Like, They would have to invent like new punishments for me, like because like ISIS punishments in this film, except for the stoning, didn't look that bad.
Wow, they literally killed
They
people.
literally killed people. Yes, they did. But yeah. What did I have to say about this part? Yeah, when I was thinking about the crazy lady throughout this film, it made me think about how, like, in so many films, there's like this, you know, supposedly like stupid character or character who like acts outside of the norms. I think of like Jar Jar Binks in Star Wars, or Yoda from Star Wars, or like what's his name, Dolby from like Harry Potter, right? That's his name, Dolby, right?
Dobie.
Dolby, yeah, Dolby. I'm thinking Dolby, but like that's the sound system. But anyway, like there are these characters who are like loons, but they know more than they let on, if that makes sense. And they're able to exist outside of the system because they're so crazy, and because they're so eccentric. So yeah, when he made that comparison between the woman who was in the house singing and stuff like that, like she wasn't eccentric enough to exist outside. And also in societies, like we allow space for like some eccentrics to exist, but not everybody can be eccentric enough to escape, the totality of the ruling regime, right? Because then
Yeah.
society wouldn't function. But go ahead.
Yeah, that was my theory too. Like they just didn't take her seriously because they just assumed she was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, what she represented was like, sort of like a not crazy person. I don't think she was actually crazy, but I think she was an artist, and that under this regime, she sort of went crazy, if that
Mm-hmm.
makes sense. Like, I don't think she actually had like mental issues,
Right.
but she was not able to cope with the oppression. So then, like, as a coping mechanism, she's like always laughing
Mm-hmm.
and doing weird stuff, you know? But if you look at her, there was a scene where she was sort of like telling something to the jihadist,
Mm-hmm.
saying like, I was also born in Haiti or something. Like, I didn't really understand that part. But maybe, I thought, okay, maybe she traveled or maybe she didn't, but she knows about like the black people in Haiti and she's like connecting with them in a spiritual way or something. Like it didn't really make sense what he said, but she also like there was a scene where there was a man who was like dancing in front of her, right? That sort of supported my artist point. And yeah, at the same time, like, she was wearing like this colorful dresses and she was decorating her little balcony. So for me, she was like that crazy artist gone like crazy.
Yeah, she didn't travel to Haiti. She was knowledgeable about the world around her. And the person that was dancing was the leader of ISIS, because behind closed doors, he didn't actually believe in what he was promoting to society.
That was the leader.
Yes.
Okay, I did not see that. I mean, I did not recognize him.
Yeah, it was him without the head wrap.
Okay, wow. Then that says like a lot more. Okay. Should I continue? Anything
Yeah.
else? Okay. In a printed director's statement, Sissako has said that what triggered this movie was an incident that took place in Aguelhok, another northern Mali town that fell into the hands of Ansar Dine. It was the 2012 death by stoning of a man and a woman who had loved each other and had children, and whose only crime was that they had never been married in the eyes of God. His deliberately abrupt insertion of a similar scene into Timbuktu focuses on a man and a woman responding with stoic resignation to being planted in the sandy execution grounds up to their necks. This premature burial is the obscene prelude to lethal stones raining down on their heads.
Yeah, I felt like the stoning scene was not as brutal. And it sort of came out of nowhere because we don't know that story. Like those people that are getting stoned, we're not introduced to them. There's no trial that we hear about or anything like that, from my recollection, right?
Yeah.
So it just sort of happens and it doesn't have that impact. When you find out the story behind it, it has meaning. But I feel like this film was directed towards a very Mauritian, very Malian, very West African Sahelian audience who would who would catch things that we're not catching being from the outside.
Yeah. And yeah, like we didn't know the backgrounds of those characters, but I still thought it was brutal because, yeah. I mean, they don't really exactly for a long time show the stoning part, but they rather show like after when they are dead. And also, it's sort of like, I don't know, like, you wake up one morning and you see like these two heads who are buried in the sand and they're dead and you don't even know what they did. And that's sort of like the life that some of these people are going through.
Right. And I think, once again, this film is a slice of life, but it's also like a sociological case study, right? Because this is a example of a society in an hour and 30 minutes. And if you live in a society, there are things that you wake up and check the news and you read about and you're like, damn, this is happening all around me. Like there's a billion storylines going on all around us, right? And some of them are heroic and some of them are tragic. Some of them are comedic, but they're all happening around us and we don't exactly know why. So this film, it doesn't tell that story in the exact way where you know exactly why it happens, but it's like you're living in this village and you look out the window and you see two people with their heads, sticking out of the sand, getting stoned to death, right? And that's sort of like what society is like. We just look on our phones or look out the window, see something happening, and we're like, what the hell is this? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Because I don't know, like when you're in it, it's not, you can't do the things that you said you would, or it doesn't affect you the same way. And I don't know, like, especially if you're from like a certain region, you know, I always say this, like in Turkey, saying geography is your destiny is a big thing. And, yeah, that's why it's like sort of embedded in me, though sometimes I disagree with it. But yeah, especially if you're like from a certain place, maybe the way you handle things are different. And yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, yeah. Like, this all sets it up because we haven't talked about the other part of this storyline that's happening in this film, like the main plot
Hmm.
line. But this all sets it up to sort of like realize this is an unjust society. Not because of like, the rules that they're inflicting, even though that has a big part, but how they exact punishment. Because I think a society could have rules for almost anything, and some rules could be ridiculous, but it matters about the punishment. For example, a society could say weed is illegal here, but if you get caught with weed, you don't pay a fine, you don't go to jail. The police just wags your finger in your face and tells you you're morally wrong, right? Like that could be, that could be how, the society deals with it. So I don't think laws in and of themselves make society, immoral or unjust or unfair. It's about punishment. And when we see people getting stoned to death, there's like a reaction to it that says, that's just wrong how it's done. Does that make sense? I don't know if you agree or
Yeah.
disagree with me on like that idea that some laws can be unfair. It doesn't matter as long as the punishment is not, obscene.
Mm, in a sense, I agree, but I think also like the motive and the reason behind the laws is a deciding factor for me as well. Like, I don't know, in some place, um, weed is illegal, but like, what is the justification for that? What is the reason for that? I think that also says something about the morality of it.
Mm-hmm.
But also the punishment says something as well.
Right.
Like, if you're not given, oh, like they found weed in your pocket, and then if you're not given like 50 years of jail, then yeah, like it's somewhat moral. If you're just giving like a money fine or
Right.
something.
But I think, think about what you would rather prefer. Would you rather prefer weed is, illegal and you get 5 years in jail, or weed is illegal, but the punishment is only a €5 fine or something?
Yeah, like 5 year
Of
fine.
course, right? So I think, in this society, they say we don't want people to have sex. We want women to wear gloves. We want people to act a certain way. But that in and of itself is okay. But the problem is how you inflict punishment on people that disobey those laws, right? That's my thing about it.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, it sort of goes hand in hand. Like, if you forbid a bunch of ridiculous things and then, charge $1 for each of them, people will still do it.
Right.
That's why they have to, like, inflict more pain on people so that people actually don't do it, because what they want from people is ridiculous. Like, not play music, not play football, and things like that.
Right.
So I think it goes hand in hand, and that's why I said the reason behind the rules are also important.
Well, that's Switzerland or Singapore. In Switzerland, it's €100 fine to spit on the street. It's €200 if you put home trash in an outside trash can, right? Like, those things, we would consider those, excessive punishments for crimes. But people sign up for that social contract. They say that's okay, we can live in this society that has some benefits and some negatives, or maybe excessive or obscene laws, but we want this trade-off.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, like, when you look at the reason, okay, why can't you put trash in the street without that sort of excessive punishment? There's a reason behind it that sort of makes sense. Because, like, we want to, protect our environment. You want to keep everything clean. And when there's no excessive punishment towards it, everyone still does it. Like in Turkey, for example, where our sea is full of trash because people don't care. Anyway, I'm going to continue.
All right, go ahead.
Now we get to the other storyline in the movie, so I'll read these 2 paragraphs. Timbuktu makes you understand how clashes that fizzle out in normal times turn calamitous under an inhumane regime. In the desert not far from the city, a goat and cattle herder named Kidane, his wife Satima, his daughter Toya, and an orphan boy Isan, who tends their cattle, live in a traditional pastoral life, though most of their neighbors have fled. Apart from Satima, who misses her female friends, they go on as before. Kidane even plays his guitar since there's no one around to report him. Sissako basks in the family's warmth without romanticizing their patriarchal unit. Kidane exudes domestic love and masculine complacency. He's a touching protagonist with emotions close to the surface. Satima seems more distant and impassive, but she's the one who understands the dangers surrounding them. A rangy, fidgety jihadist named Abdul Karim has his eye on her. Abdul Karim provides the movie's fullest portrait of jihadist arrogance and hypocrisy. He orders Satima to veil her head while looking at her lasciviously. He smokes, he thinks in secret, and is amazed that his driver says everybody knows about it. Just to blow off steam, he picks up his automatic rifle and shoots the top of a fragile mound of desert greenery. You want to say something?
Go ahead.
Okay. The family's downfall comes from a long-standing feud with a nearby fisherman. This man carries himself like a knife blade and gleams with hatred whenever Isan allows Kidane's cattle to veer too close to his precious nets. When Kidane prepares to confront him over the meandering of a favorite pregnant cow into his nets, Satima urges her husband in vain to leave his gun in the tent. When Kidane says that the humiliation must stop, you know that he is responding to pressures that go beyond water rights or the fate of a beloved animal. Kidane's reactive anger and aggrieved honor, which puts at risk his beloved wife and the daughter who's the apple of his eye, anchor the film emotionally. He grows in stature as he clings to his love for them. Sissako views Kidane's tragedy as one of many. Multiple anecdotes about town dwellers prove just as desolating, like a forced marriage between a modest, beautiful Timbuktu girl and a haughty radical invader.
So there's a lot I gotta say about Kidane and his story in this film. Like I think I said at the beginning of this review, this movie made me think about my own country a lot because, number one, we have this tendency in America to have this desire to create this theocracy, this shining city on the hill, guided by Christian principles. So we do have like an ISIS sort of, contingency within us. There's some people who desire for America to be ruled by the Bible, and for us to reestablish traditional gender norms and rules, and hardcore penalties from the Bible, right? There's a part that exists, but we also have within the American psyche this idea of like living out on your own, on the prairie, being free, away from society, right? And when I look at Kidane's story, right, he's living sort of in between those two worlds, which are sort of like an American ideal. And I know this is an African story. I'm not trying to center America in this, but great art should make you reflect on where you come from and stuff like that too. So Kidane lives, somewhat a better lifestyle than people in the city do, because he's free from government control, really. But at the same time, he still suffers from some of the machismo and patriarchy, and the desire to assert dominance over others, over this petty beef over a cow that gets killed. You get what I'm saying? And that becomes his downfall. And I think you were saying earlier, like a lot of the people that join ISIS are these young men who are just radicalized and have a lot of energy. But I believe also there's a part that wants to assert masculinity and patriarchy as well, which is why people get so gung-ho about ISIS or any other, extremist group that seeks to reassert men on top and tradition on top. So Kidane sort of like symbolizes both things for me, and he's sort of parallel to ISIS in this movie, which goes to show like there's no heroes in this film. There's no heroes. There are certain villains, but the villain is a greater thing that exists within man and in societies that men create. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I guess what you're also saying is Kidane has those like toxic, masculine things within himself too. But the terrorist groups takes it to an
Mm-hmm.
extreme, where for Kidane it's just like his tradition, his history, his lifestyle, and yeah, it also like goes to show that yeah, maybe it's not ideal to live in a patriarchal world,
Mm-hmm.
but also in this type of world, love can exist, respect can exist between spouses and in families, so I like that also.
Yeah, because the love between Satima and Kidane seems real, seems genuine, you know?
Yeah, couple
Okay.
goals. I told you,
What?
like, there's a scene, remember you were like also laughing and talking about it. Like, there's a scene where they're living in like this tent thing, right? Out in the desert, and it's like about nighttime, and Kidane is like playing guitar to, his wife and his child, his daughter, and they're like looking at each other in such ways that you cannot like, you see the
Mhm.
passion,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
Like the way he was playing the guitar and looking at his girl, like he was fingering the strings like Jimi Hendrix, and she's just like swaying back and forth, and he's got that steely eyed look like, yeah, that's how I got you pregnant, bitch. That's how I got you. That's how I got you living in a
Yeah,
tent. You can't get enough of me. You get what I'm saying? But
yeah.
what did you think of Satima as a female character? Because she's the most prominent female character in this film.
Mhm. Well, I thought she was strong, and she tried to, guide her husband in the best way as she can, because I don't think she took what was happening around them lightly. Whereas Kidane, I think his like masculinity sort of like blinded his eyes a little
Hmm.
bit. And he was like, oh, we can do like, if we stick together, we can do whatever. Like we can survive
Hmm.
this. But Satima, being a woman and knowing like, the reality of the world and how the world treats her, I think she sort of had a more pessimistic view of the reality that was happening. And yeah, I liked her in general. She was a good mom. She was a good wife. And it goes to show also, like, from the Muslim point of view, she didn't she wasn't like covering everything, right? And she wasn't like this extreme Muslim woman, though she was a good wife. She never, betrayed her husband. She was a good mom. So yeah.
Yeah, it made me, the way Satima like acts and dresses and stuff like that, it made me think of like what I heard while living in Tunisia. It's that some people who don't cover have a covered heart. You know what I mean? Like, cause the ISIS guy shows up and he's like, basically trying to flirt with her like an awkward teenager. And she's like, I'm a married woman. You should leave me. Why are you always visiting me when my husband leaves? You know what I'm saying? Implying that he's sinning and stuff like that. And, he's saying like, you should cover. And then she says, if you don't like what you see, don't look. You know what I mean? Like, these are all like things that Islamically can be held up and morally are, correct ways to answer to somebody who's saying that you're immoral for how you're acting. So it just made me think like
Yeah.
Satima had like a covered heart. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and she got that pussy power.
Yeah, yeah. Though she is
Cause
not,
she knew
though she
like,
is not the finest woman in this film.
yeah, but she knew like, she can say whatever to him and that he will not do anything to
Yeah.
her. In that moment at
Yeah,
least.
yeah. I really love the
Um,
scene when the ISIS guy, is like trying to holler and then like she like basically like stonewalls him. So then like there's this awkward back and forth he like does for like a good 10 seconds on screen. It's so perfect. Like I've been in that position so many times. You like try to holler at somebody and she's like, I got a boyfriend. And you're like, okay, all right, hold on, wait. I got to come back. Nah, I don't. Wait. Okay, well, he's a lucky man, and then you walk away feeling like you did something.
wow. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
hilarious.
But I really want to talk about like the murder that happens, when
Hmm.
Kidane kills the fisherman, right? And how that was done, because I thought, the film was going to set it up to where like, okay, the ISIS leader who wants his wife is going to like frame him for murder, and then Kidane is going to be railroaded by this unjust system because somebody wants to smash his wife. But that didn't happen. Like the murder that actually happens is totally unjustified on the part of Kidane, who is supposed to be, or was set up to be, our protagonist, our lone man who lives rightly and correctly and morally upstanding outside of the city. You get what I'm saying? But he commits a
Yeah.
cold-blooded murder. What did you think about that?
Yeah, I think like, uh, it was just like stupid, obviously, to kill someone over a cow, right?
Well, let's just
And
be respectful because these people don't have money per se. Their wealth is their cow. So it's like somebody saying, to steal our computer. You know what I mean?
yeah, would you kill
I wouldn't
them?
kill them, but like, I literally work and live on the computer. Without it, we couldn't live. So, it's a big deal.
Yeah, but as someone who like sort of portrays himself a bit like philosophical, I thought that was like ironic of him to do and that sort of thing about something material.
Hmm.
I understand that it's a big thing, it's their survival and whatnot, but it's still not worth, taking a
Right.
life. Like I'm never gonna agree to
Hmm.
that. And it's also like sort of, I mean, like what you said, these are what these people do for a living, right? The
Hmm.
other guy, he has these nets, and I'm guessing like when the cow walked into the nets, his whole thing was fucked up. And maybe he had to get like new nets and things like that, right?
Hmm.
So that's the reason why he gave such a big reaction by killing the cow with a spear.
Hmm.
And then in return, Kidane gave an extreme reaction by killing him.
Right.
So for me, it's also a bit of like that frustration built up from the system that they're living in a little bit.
Hmm.
They might be living like this pastoral life outside, but at the same time, it's not like they're not getting affected
Right.
by everything that's happening. And that's why I think it got so elevated
Hmm.
to a point where there was a murder.
Hmm.
And also the shot that they did of the murder, I think you also very much liked it as well. It was very like poetic. And it was a beautiful like scenery with something very tragic that was happening.
Yeah, like the way they shoot the after effects of the murder. Basically, like Kidane like gets up abruptly after they're fighting in the water in the lake, and they pan out to a view of the entire lake, and we see Kidane walk across this shallow lake, and then as he makes it across, like the other guy he just murdered is still alive, and he's trying to like get up and make it, and he's like falling down constantly in the water, and it's like set against this backdrop of the sunset. Very beautiful scene, very powerful. Really liked it. And it's
Yeah.
followed by a hilarious scene where the ISIS guys show up and they say, "Sir, on the radio, there's been a murder," and he's saying it in Arabic. But the Arabic commander is like, "Your Arabic is horrible. Say it in English." So the guy says, "Somebody has been killed." And the ISIS leader says, "I don't understand you. I'll call you back." Like, once again, the language barriers and the translations make for some like hilarious moments in this film mixed with tragedy.
Yeah. Yeah, like I just want to go once more again to that like scene because it felt like both emotions that you get from both sides was so intense. I felt like because when the murder happened, Kidane was almost in shock. Like something came over him, and then he killed him or something like that. And he was like trying to run across the river, and he kept on falling. It was like he didn't kill the guy, and then he just like fainted and got up with someone dead on him.
Yeah.
You know, he was in shock of doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, you have like this survival thing going on the other guy's end where he's like trying to hold on to his life and he gets up and falls down. It was like almost like Shakespearean tragedy. I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's like, with the sun setting on that scene, it's like a sunset on the life. A life is ending, like the day is ending, but also Kadane's life is ending right now too. So it's like big poetic, like you said, Shakespearean. But I want to talk about, Toya, Kidane's daughter. She's this young girl who's talking to Isan after Isan is very upset that the cow, GPS, by the way, the cow was called GPS, makes no sense. GPS gets killed, Isan is upset, but Toya is talking to Isan and saying like, my daddy says like, people who make war, always die. And war is bad, and basically giving this whole speech that she heard from her father. So it makes me think like Kidane knew better than to murder this guy, the fisherman. But he did it anyway out of pride and for the same reasons that ISIS does it, right? To enforce some sort of patriarchy, to enforce his dominance over the world, to show that he cannot be pushed around in this part of the world where might makes right.
Yeah, yeah, like once again, there's a lot of irony in this movie. Like, you know, he's this guy who loves his daughter, like really truly loves his daughter. And he sort of like raises his daughter with a lot of love, you know, teaching her all the right things and same with her mother as well. And then he goes and kills someone, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like very ironic. And at the same time, it's like, you know, I don't know if this is a international saying, but you know, in Turkey we say like, do what I say and not do what I do.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So there's like that hypocrisy in his behavior as well, just like how there's hypocrisy in Abdul Karim's behavior.
Yeah.
The leader of, the jihadists.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Later on when Kidane gets like taken in by the police and stuff like that, he's being interrogated by the leader, the true leader of ISIS, I guess the ideological leader, or one of the judges, right? But the judge can't speak to him in his language because Kidane speaks Tamashek. So he has a guy who's masked up, interpreting for him from Tamashek to Arabic and back and forth, right? And Kidane is like, saying like, I have a daughter, I have a wife, I really want to see them before I die and stuff like that. And the Arabic interpreter, is, telling the judge this and stuff like that. And I think one of the most important parts of this film, is when, Kidane says, I think I recognize who you are. And he says, you're from this tribe and this people and stuff like that. And the guy says, no, I'm not. I'm from Libya. And then Kidane says, what are you doing to my people or our people? You know, you came from afar with this different thing, that we've never heard of. And now you've twisted us all. You get what I'm saying? And the guy says basically, you know, like, whatever God wills is what it wills, or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, that to me, I think is the most important part of this film because like, you know, there's always this, in the film, there are many different types of people. There are like Arabic looking people, very light skinned people, and very dark skinned black people interacting in this place, right? And historically, like Northern Africa and, you know, Black Africa have had like a contentious relationship. You know, North Africans literally enslaved Black Africans for centuries, right? And racial discrimination between the groups still persists, right? But there's also like this importation of like culture from North Africa and also culture from Black Africa going back and forth and stuff like that. And so like, when the North Africans get radicalized, they want to then spread that sort of, ideology amongst the people in Black Africa as well. And it seems like a type of terrorism that also has like a racial distinction to it as well, because many of the people that we see leading this group of ISIS, right? They typically look more of the Arab lighter version. There are some black people there, but they seem more like henchmen rather than, the leaders of the organization, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. I think, colorism or race does play a role in this, power structure, especially in the movie as well. But I have to say, honestly, I was a bit mad at Kidane or annoyed with him at this point. Like, I knew this was supposed to be his, like, sentimental speech. And, also says something about the occupation that's going on, but also like his family. But I really was annoyed with him when he talks about his family and his daughter, because I was like, why the fuck did you do it then? Like, your wife literally told you not to take your gun because she knew you would do the stupid shit.
Right.
She knew you too well.
Right.
And then you've done it, and now you're coming up to them and saying, I'm ready to die or whatever. Like you're some martyr or something.
And that's why I think this film says the most about the death penalty. Because throughout the movie, we see people getting unjustly punished for crimes that shouldn't be crimes, like playing music or whatever, right? Kidane did a real serious crime in an unjust system. Now he might beg and plead, and we might feel sorry for him. But in all of our societies, we've had murderers who have committed heinous crimes in passion or plotted it out. But they continue to say, oh, please forgive me and stuff like that. But we don't want murderers living amongst us. But do we also want those murderers to die? Right? Or should they be killed by the state? A state that does unjustness to all people. Because while we're saying hey, Kidane, you need to be punished for what you did, I don't think you or me was saying and ISIS should be the one to punish you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think if you're saying God gives and God takes life, if that's your ideology, then I don't think you should be killing people. I don't know. That to me, knowingly killing someone, because you're bringing God's justice, but you don't even know what God's rules are, what God's justice is.
Right.
You don't know. There is no equation to say, this crime equals to 40 cows plus we murder you.
Right. Now,
so,
I just want to make this clear though. I'm going to ask you, Akdi, is Turkey a just nation?
No.
Okay. Do you think America is a just nation?
No.
No. And do you think that there's any nation in the world that's just?
I don't think so.
I don't think so, right? And I would agree. And so for people that are listening here saying oh, you can't compare America to ISIS, when really you could really make a good argument for that. But let's just say Norway. We're comparing Norway to ISIS. Norway, no matter what, will never be 100% just. And if we cannot ensure 100% justice for all people, then we shouldn't inflict justice in the sense of taking life from anybody. right? And that's what this film really made me think about. What Kidane did was absolutely horrible and unjust to the family of the man he murdered, but the unjust society shouldn't be the one to punish him. He
Yeah.
should have a punishment, but not to the level of death, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I agree. Like, he should go to jail because he took another man's life. He took someone's father.
Mm-hmm.
He took someone's son. So he should be punished, but not by death. I agree. But obviously, like, if they are, stoning two people who loved each other,
Right.
then they are going to kill him. And that was like the thing that we were waiting for in the
Right.
movie.
Which is a bit
But for
weird
me,
because they tried to like troll him and say you got to pay like 40 cows now. And he's like,
it's like 40 cows and then he also died.
yeah.
And I think they made him wait in the prison until they were able to give the 40 cows.
Yeah.
And then they asked the family of the guy he killed again if they forgive him. And they said, I don't forgive him. And then, because they didn't forgive him, he was gonna die. He was gonna get executed.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, like, after that point, I'm sorry, I wasn't feeling Kidane. Cause I was like, bro, you fucked up.
Yeah.
And this, like, martyr act is not working for me.
Yeah.
Though I did like him questioning, like, that other guy about what they are doing to their city. I like that part. And it showed, like, okay, there's more frustration in him than just a dead cow.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Well, let's continue in the article.
Yeah, we have 2 more paragraphs left. It's Sissako's collaboration with cinematographer Sofiane El Fani, who also did Blue is the Warmest Color, that lifts and shrivels your heart at the same time. Fierce, poignant imagery abounds. In a panoramic wide shot, the movie makers depict the aftermath of a murder in a shallow river, the killer splashing back in a straight line to the far shore, aghast at his own action, and the victim lying still before making one last desperate stab at life. The filmmakers shoot with intimate close-ups, a man breaking into an impromptu Tai Chi-like ballet of longing and perhaps expiation. He bows his head and plunges his fingers into sand. And in one of the most astonishing sequences of this century, the camera gently partners teams of football players who play a soccer match without the ball. Its defiant dance of life performed with surpassing grace in a violated desert landscape as jihadists on motorbikes buzz the playing field like death's emissaries in Cocteau's Orpheus. The scene is a triumph of imagination for these characters and for the filmmakers. It makes you both impossibly happy and devastatingly sad. My major quibble with the movie pales before its poetry, but I wish Sissako had found some artful way of incorporating more history into his visual mosaic. Only by reading Yaroslav's Trofimov's Fate at War, a journey on the front lines of Islam from Baghdad to Timbuktu, did I learn that a 2004 Freedom House report ranked Mali as one of 2 totally free, in quotation marks, countries out of 48 Muslim majority states. 47 Muslim majority states, sorry. According to Trofimov, Mali in general and Timbuktu in particular nurtured religious tolerance and secular democracy. Then I don't know why I can't say this name. Trofimov visited Timbuktu a decade ago during statewide elections. The city even had a feminist candidate for mayor. Mali's president Amadou Toumani Touré told him, "The state never enmeshed itself with the affairs of religion, and that's what allowed us to have a stable and peaceful country. We see nothing in our religion that's against democracy. It wouldn't even come to a Malian's mind to think that there's a contradiction." In this context, Timbuktu takes on an apocalyptic impact. It chronicles a kind of barbarism that rends the very fabric of historical reality.
Yeah, so if the argument he's making at the end of the movie is that this movie is a bit unrealistic in the sense that Mali is more of a secular nation than religious. I've never been to Mali, so I'm not going to purport to be an expert on that. But I've been to a lot of Muslim majority countries. And when people say like, oh, our country, we don't take religion that seriously and stuff like that, when it gets down to the nitty gritty, they still take religion seriously. Like even a country like Turkey, which is by far like one of the more secular and liberal places, right? That only exists pretty much like in the big cities to some degree, that, women are wearing whatever they want and people are openly drinking and stuff like that. Like in other parts of that same country, it could be not too far off from, elements of this. Not that they're beheading people and stuff like that, but like, there's still a lot of religion, especially in Islamic countries, that permeates the air, right? And
Of
permeates
course.
society and culture and the unwritten rules of how things are done, I would say.
Yeah, of course. Like in Turkey, when a woman, a young woman, like 15, 16, gets, raped and killed by some sick dude, and the justification for him not going to prison is, why was she out in such a late night? Why was she wearing that? That's not like good. That's haram.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's the argument that you're making, like, yeah, of course, religion plays a huge role in your society. If you're doing that in front of the law,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's working. So yeah, even though Turkey is secular or liberal, maybe from outside, people inside still suffer from that, like, that effect of religion and
Mm-hmm.
extremist religion.
Mm-hmm.
Not like that religion is something bad, but the way that it's, used on people to inflict pain and force.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what causes the problem, and Turkey's not an exception.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've been to Indonesia, been to Malaysia, Turkey, Tunisia, Qatar, right? And those are Muslim majority nations, and they all practice in different ways. But one of the through lines through them is that there is, an element of extremism that exists in society, the unwritten rules that sort of dominate how people interact and stuff like that. And just the general, air, the atmosphere. It's hard to explain if you've never been or lived in a Muslim majority nation, right? And, in my country, going back to mine, if Mali is, if I take the article on its face value, if Mali is a nation that sort of separates religion from democracy or society, uh, we've been doing that. Like we've founded a whole nation trying to do that. And yet and still we have people that are saying, we want to bring the Bible back in schools. We want to put the 10 Commandments on the walls in every, judge, in every courthouse across the nation and stuff like that. So that element will always exist as long as we have, religion in society, because fanaticism will always arise, in religion, not for a majority, but for some.
Yeah. I mean, maybe what the writer is trying to say here, that the history of, there should be more history of Malayan people's perspective on religion and politics together.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's what he's trying to say. And maybe that's would also be some justification of how they handled the situation.
Yeah.
But yeah. Well, that's it for the the writing.
Yeah, I think we should talk about the final scene, because this article we read was like spoiler free. So essentially, Kidane is about to be executed, and his wife pulls up on a motorcycle to come and meet him at at the place where he's going to be executed. Kidane sees his wife and tries to run to her, but the ISIS soldiers like shoot him in the back and also thus shoot his wife as well. And they both lay dead on top of each other. And then all mayhem breaks out in the town square where people came to watch this, execution. And ISIS starts to like chase the motorcycle driver who was like running away. Uh, even though he was just like the taxi guy, I guess. But yeah,
Yeah, he was a tuk-tuk.
like just mayhem ensues. ISIS is chasing the guy on the motorcycle. And then we're also reintroduced to shots of the antelope at the beginning, and the ISIS guy shouting, don't kill him, just tire him out or something like that. And then we realize, oh, they're not
Mhm.
talking about an antelope. They're talking about this guy that he's chasing. And also at the same time, Kidane's daughter, Toya, is running in the desert, I guess chasing after her mother who went to go see her father. And also Isan, the adopted boy that Kidane was raising, is, chasing after Toya. And the final scene is just Toya just like running in the desert. What'd you think of that?
Yeah. I mean, it was a very abrupt and sad resolution to the whole like storyline. And yeah, it was obviously like very sad. And I was also like somewhat, sadly moved by how they were going to execute him as well. Cause they had like all these people, there to watch. And that reminded me of like ancient times where like that was the entertainment for people, and I guess like I understand to a degree if like the family wants to see justice done, but it's like still a bit like, it's too much. It's too much. Even if I sent a man to death, I wouldn't want to see it possibly. And I wouldn't send a man to death either. But yeah, and then after like the whole chaos ensues and they're chasing the man and there was like the reference back to the gazelle, that was cool. And at some point I thought Toya was gonna meet the soldiers or the guy and then something was gonna happen to her too. And I was sort of scared for her. I didn't want anything to happen to her. And then we also see Isan, the cowboy, the herder boy that they sort of adopted, I guess, because we learned that he doesn't have any family, that he's an orphan, right? And now Toya is in the same situation. She's an orphan now. And I like the fact that Isan was running after Toya, sort of, I guess, trying to console her the way she consoled him when GPS died, when the cow died.
Calling a cow
Which was like a
GPS will never
cool,
not be funny.
which was like, a little nice child love, like child friendship or whatever. And, yeah. Well, now that I think about it, at first I didn't like the ending that much. I thought it was too fast, but now thinking about it, I think there's more to it.
Yeah, I just go back to the scene of Kidane getting killed and shot in the back, and it just makes me think like, these ISIS guys failed at running this society because they can't do anything in order. Like it's like these guys are like bumbling idiots who just like picked up the Quran yesterday, and they're trying to figure out the rules and the laws and stuff like that. But yeah, throughout this film, there's also that old wise man who's a sheikh who is like giving advice to the people who are running ISIS and telling them to stop what they're doing and that they're hurting Muslims. I wish there was some more, a resolution for his part at least, like how he, was how he ended up being. But I think this film opens up a big universe, like Divorced in Black. Like once this movie is established, you could have like several different spin-off sitcoms or like 3 parts or 4 parts to this movie where you build on the Timbuktu verse. And it can get really deep. Like Toya gets married to Satima. Or not Satima, like the driver of the ISIS guy. You get what I'm saying? And Isan
Wow.
becomes like a rebel fighter against ISIS. Like it could be like a very, you can make a bigger universe. Like I could build on this all day, but I won't.
Wow. And the Imam is like
Yeah,
Dumbledore.
the Imam is like Dumbledore. He's got like Quranic magic he can do to like make people like understand, but he refuses to use it because he wants people to like come to religion on their own. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Like
I mean, I can definitely see that.
the bad singing lady, who is singing while she gets whipped, she becomes like the fourth member of like a new African Destiny's Child. And like she becomes a megastar and sings about how her village is like overtaken by terrorists to raise awareness.
Wow.
Like you could build a whole universe on top of these characters because there's so much unleft done. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like you said, it's not like a detailed plot
Yeah,
story. It is like a slice of life, and we see slices of some characters.
yeah.
And yeah, we don't know, like, if something happened to them, or if they're alive or whatever.
Yeah. But overall, final score for this film, I gotta give it maybe like a 6.5 or 7, leaning more towards a 7. Um, I would not recommend this film for everybody. This is for people that are like, looking to see a different part of the world from a country, from a place that doesn't often make movies or have their films talked about. If you're looking for, a plot, a story that's gonna like move you, maybe the ending might move you to tears or touch something in you, but it might be frustrating for a lot of people to watch this and be like, wait, what happened to this guy or that girl? And what's happening now? You know what I mean? So, gotta give it a 7. It's not for everybody. I appreciate it. I like it, but I don't love it.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna give it an 8. Because I really appreciate the perspective this movie takes. Once again, like, taking a side, but not in your face, not showing it like in your face. And I like the dualities that exist in this movie within the characters. I like the cinematography. I like the music, which, the sexy lady, the sexy Malian lady, by the way, she's a singer-songwriter who did the soundtrack for this movie, and her name is Fatoumata Diawara. And when you type in the name of this movie on YouTube, the song also comes up. So if you're interested, you can check it out. Anyway, yeah, that's why I'm gonna give it an 8. And I think everyone can watch this movie because it's not like a super long movie. I think even if maybe you get confused or bored at some points, I think, you would be able to finish the movie. It's 1 hour and 30 minutes. And the scenery is like very enjoyable to watch. And I don't think it's like a boring movie or, that much of a confusing movie.
Yeah.
There's just like things left unsaid, and that's it.
Yeah, I can't recommend it to everybody because I think there's a high probability somebody could watch this and be like, "Yep, they're all terrorists."
No,
I think some.
I don't think that will. I mean, unless you're like a very close-minded bigot, I don't think that's going to happen to you.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I'll say. I think everyone can watch this.
All right. Well, I think we'll wrap it up here, but this has been Simon and Akdi Movie Reviews, episode 89. Thank you to everybody who's going to watch this in the playback. And if you have a film you want us to review, put it in the comments and we will try to get to it. Y'all be easy out there and peace.